On the night that, so this is the question. On the night of the 25th of Menachem Av, I was giving a Torah lecture at Abi Yechezkel's Klois in Slobodka. This was after the German invasion of Lithuania. Just as the joy of the Jewish people was being cut short by the Germans, in the middle of the lecture, we suddenly heard heartbreaking screaming and wailing. The daughter-in-law of Reb Zalman Sher, who was attending the class, may God avenge him, burst into the Klois and told Reb Zalman that the Germans had, moments ago, killed her 3 sons together with her husband. Reb Zalman's son. Right then and there, as the woman bewailed these tragic 4 deaths, her father-in-law passed out, fell off the chair, and died right before our eyes, in the synagogue. The director of the Chevra Kadisha, the burial society, who was responsible for arranging funerals in accord with the Jewish custom, posed the following problem to me. So this is 3 people just died. This gentleman just died in the synagogue, and somebody's in the synagogue asking him a question as this is happening. I mean, this stuff's happening all the time. It's almost like kind of like routine, and people are still asking their questions. So the question was like this: since the enemy's decrees affected the entire population, both the living and the dead, it was impossible to know when the funeral and burial would be able to take place. Under the tragic circumstances of the German invasion, there was no question it would take at least a day or 2. So it's possible that by the time the funeral could be arranged, there would be no one available to perform the tahara. By the time the funeral will be arranged in a day or 2, there might not even be people around to cleanse the body. So, you're supposed to cleanse the body as close to burial, do the cleansing process as close to burial as possible. So they were wondering if they can do the tahara, the purification process now, immediately, while there's people here to still do it. So they came and asked him the question. So he says like this: be present in our Klois, however, there were a number of Reb Zalman's close friends, and it seemed best to extend the final respect to the departed by performing the Torah immediately, on the very table where the fallen Jew had just studied Mishnah and Talmud. The question was simply, is it permissible to make the Torah, the purification, in advance, rather than as close to the funeral as possible? So it also stands out as, what are these people, it's amazing that they're still thinking about this stuff. People are like literally, the connection to the tradition amidst everything. So the answer: I permitted immediate purification Tahara for Reb Zalman. For future instances in the ghetto, I instructed the director of the burial society to perform the Tahara for the deceased as soon as possible, since no one would ever be certain that it would be possible to perform the Tahara, the purification, close to burial. So this is a law that usually people are really careful. You have to do it as close to burial as possible. Here, under the circumstances, he said everybody should do it immediately. They weren't even sure if people were going to be around. That's one of them. Here's another one. This is a question about tefillin. I was asked to render a halachic decision on the following problem. A boy whose leg the Germans has amputated lay in the hospital, wishing to pray, to God, nevertheless. He sent a request through Jewish channels that a pair of tefillin be sent into the hospital. A persistent rumor in the ghetto claimed that the Germans burned every patient's personal possessions upon his death or dismissal. So the question was, should we send him the tefillin in the hospital if we know for sure it's going to be burnt or destroyed? So they asked the rabbi that. So the rabbi answered, I ruled that tefillin might be sent to the lad so that he could fulfill the Torah's commandment. The story of the Germans burning personal effects was an unsubstantiated rumor, one of many produced by the fear that reigned in the ghetto. If we had known it to be a fact, I would definitely have forbidden sending him the tefillin, because it would just get destroyed and it'd be to no effect. But a rumor alone was not enough to deprive that lad praying with tefillin. They were sent through a trustworthy emissary who gave them secretly to the boy away from German eyes. But that's not the end of the story. I also felt that tefillin would be an inspiration to the boy, a recent Baal Tshuva, someone who just repented, who had changed his life around from non-observance to observance. He's coming close to God. He's doing what he can to change his life. Dr. Davidovich, who worked in the hospital, testified to the boy's immense joy when he donned the tefillin for the first time. On the 3rd of Tishrei, 5702, September 23rd, 1941, when the accursed Germans destroyed the little ghetto, they also burned down the hospital, incinerating the patients, nurses, and doctors inside. Some 60 Jews, including Dr. Davidovich and the boy to whom the tefillin had been sent, were killed in the fire. This is all in his tshuva. God avenged their blood. Wonder of wonders, one of the Jews who had been inside the hospital had miraculously been saved, and told of what had happened before the incineration. The boy who had guarded his tefillin literally with his life. When he realized that the hospital would be destroyed together with the patients and its staff, he asked this man to make every effort to hide the tefillin, so that they would not fall into the hands of the murderers, who would surely destroy them. The man succeeded in escaping from the hospital trap and showed us the treasure, the boy's tefillin that had been saved. May God fulfill in our time. From you, O God, have set in a fire, and you shall restore it through fire. That's one more. There's one more here. Okay. On May 7, 1942, the Germans issued an edict that if a Jewish woman was found pregnant, they would immediately kill her. Once this edict regarding pregnancy was issued, other problems came up. The very day the edict was issued, a pregnant Jewish woman passed by the ghetto hospital. A German noticed her swollen belly and shot her for violating the German order against reproduction. His bullet penetrated her head, and she fell dead on the spot. Passerby immediately carried her into the hospital, thinking there might be a chance to save her or the baby. Since she had clearly been in her final weeks of pregnancy, a Jewish obstetrician was rushed over. He said that if surgery was performed immediately, the baby could be saved. And what do? At this moment, they come to ask the rabbi before they do anything. Since I witnessed this shocking murder, this rabbi's witnessing murders, and was present in the hospital, I was asked if, according to halacha, it's permitted to perform the cesarean section. What's the problem? You're not allowed. Someone who died, you're not allowed to affect their body in any way. You're not allowed to damage it. So that was the question. Since no one could be sure the baby was still alive, was there halacha concern with desecration of the dead mother? In addition, in the remote possibility that the mother was still alive, cutting open the abdomen would surely kill her. So here's the answer. He said, it was clear to me that when a doctor who knows his medicine rushes to operate minutes after a woman's death, declaring that baby can be saved, one must listen to him, because the issue at that moment is saving the baby's life. Where saving a life is involved, we are not concerned with the desecration of the dead. In this case, the mother would be overjoyed if desecration of her body meant that the baby's life would be spared. I therefore will that the operation proceed as quickly as possible. As it states in the Talmud, whoever saves a single Jewish life is credited with saving the entire world. There's an even sadder ending. I don't know. The baby miraculously was alive. However, to our great sorrow, our hopes were soon shattered. The cruel murderers, the typical mad German punctiliousness for keeping records of the living and dead, soon entered the hospital to record the name of the murdered woman in the book of the dead. When they found the baby alive, their savage fury unleashed. One of the Germans grabbed the infant and cracked its skull against the wall of the hospital room. Woe unto the eyes that saw this. This is in the rabbi's Responsa. Aside from the tragedy of this, reading this as a rabbinic Jew, it's impressive that he's even able to answer these questions. He's just seeing people dying day to day. I don't know how I would handle that. In addition, I don't know, when I think about this, I think of the amount of mesirut nefesh, what our ancestors went through to uphold the tradition in the worst of conditions. And it makes me feel grateful that they did that, and maybe more strengthened to continue doing what they started, and as a sign of gratitude for what they went through.